I've been teaching my 15-year-old daughter, Livy, for the past few months how to drive. And guess who is more consistently nervous about it? It's not me. It's not me. In fact, she's doing a great job. I keep telling her that. I made sure that her first time behind the wheel was substantially different than mine. And so I bring her up here for the first handful of times to drive through in the parking lot. But it's a completely different experience from my first time, because the first time I ever got behind the wheel was in driver's ed class. My dad was a rule follower, and the rule was, hey, you're not going to be able to drive until you're in that class. And so driver's ed, if you don't know, was a class that high schools offered, and it taught you how to drive. It kind of baffles me that we don't do this now. I mean, I know that we're giving business to other people who teach you and all that stuff. That's great. But anyway, I remember being the first time, I just was so super nervous getting behind that wheel, because I had never done that before, not even around the block in my own neighborhood, which has just wide streets. I'm going to be in traffic driving in neighborhoods where they don't have super wide streets. And so that morning, one of my classmates started out first. And before I tell you how this went, the driving instructor's car had what was called a chicken brake in the passenger seat. I don't know if you know what a chicken brake is, but we got a picture of one. I don't know if they make cars like this, but I know you can install your own chicken brake into cars. Now, I'm not going to do that, but it will override the accelerator. And so if that passenger doesn't feel safe, you just hit that chicken brake and you're not going to move. So that morning, my classmate, they went first, and when their turn was over, the driver instructor says, hey, pull over. It's Brian's turn. So I get in behind the wheel, and I come to a stop after driving around for a little bit. And it's just a stop where I have to stop, but the oncoming traffic, they don't have a stop sign. And so there's probably a name for that. I don't know what it is. It's not a four-way. That's a lot of information, but it's a stop sign, right? So I'm stopped at this stop sign. I look left, and I look right, and I look left again, just like they tell you, and what you can read in the manual. There's no cars. And so I start to put my foot down on the gas and push it down. And all of a sudden, my driver instructor says, car! And I look over, and there's a station wagon, and it's just barreling down the street, headed our way. And I panic. And so I think, I must have been thinking, like, I can get through this intersection before it gets there. I don't know what I was thinking, but I panicked, and I pushed down the gas, and the driver instructor says, no, and he slams on the chicken brake. I go to the brake, and I'm continuing to panic, and then I hit the gas, and the RPMs go like this. And I'm like shaking. He's like, what are you doing? You're going to get us killed. More, what are you doing? And so finally, I put my foot on the brake for good. And I'm shaking and sweating. And everyone is just like, right? And he says, you could have killed us. What were you thinking? And those are the first words that my driver instructor spoke over me. What a blessing. So jokes aside, it did something for me. It solidified in my brain, yeah, I want to be a good driver. I want to be good at this thing, because I don't want to end up like this guy. What was going through that guy's minds? Drugs, probably lots and lots of drugs. And no one wants this to happen either, right? In fact, there was a car near my neighborhood that got burned out this weekend. Anyway, back to my story featuring the chicken brake. I share that story to illustrate this idea, that there is no necessary correlation between intent and outcome. I intended to not get crashed into by that station wagon. My driving instructor intended to not get crushed by that station wagon. But the outcome would have been terribly different if not for that wonderful gift from God known as the chicken brake. We're in a message series called The Weight of Your Words. And if you've ever been crushed by someone's words or you've been filled to the top with encouragement, you know that words have power. Words can leave a mark or leave us floating on air. We've talked about how we've been shaped by words that we heard. We've been shaped by words that we didn't hear. We've been shaped by words that we didn't hear but needed to hear, words that we never heard. Phrases like, "You're working so hard, keep it up, I'm proud of you." We recognize how people's words have effect on us, but often what we're slow to recognize and take responsibility is for how our words can have an impact on other people. If you're a Christ follower, this isn't an add-on. It's not something that you can kind of tinker with if you feel inclined. This is what it means to follow Jesus. It's baked into the equation. And it's because of this overarching command that we've been given to love God and to love other people the way we love ourselves. So in episode 1, Aaron talked about how negative words weigh more than positive words. We came up with a fun graphic. Looks way different than the drawing I did to say, hey, can you make this? Because the drawing was awful. We talked about how we need our words to be used to build other people up for their needs, for what they need. Last week, we talked about how the source of the word determines the weight of the words. We came up with a word problem math equation. The words times the source equal the weight. And we also talked about how the weight determines the impact, which determines the outcome. And here's that concept in that word problem format, that the weight to the impact power equals the outcome. Today, I'm going to dig into what I mentioned just a minute ago, that there is no necessary correlation between intent and outcome. In other words, like when it comes to car accidents, the intent cannot remove the dent. There's no necessary correlation, but what we intended to do, what we intended to communicate, and the outcome of what was said. We all understand this when we get behind the wheel or we just get into a car. No one says, hey, I want to get behind the wheel. I want to get into a car accident today. No one sets out to do this, except for demolition derby contestants. They're getting in cars to crash into other cars. But when something's broken, when we try to explain why it's broken, doesn't get it repaired. In relationships, we hurt other people with our words, with what we say. When we go to explain why we said what we said, oftentimes it just leads to more harm than anything. It might end up making things worse. Now, if I were sitting next to my wife, Rachel, and listening to this message, I'd be getting an elbowful because this is what I do. If I harm her with my words, I try to explain why I said what I said. And guess what? She does not like that. She doesn't want it. It doesn't help anything. I need to say, I'm sorry. And I said this and it hurt your feelings. If we're on the other end of hurtful words, we don't need an explanation. We need to be glued back together. We need to be repaired. Explaining why you said something stupid, that's not an ingredient for an apology. And this applies to more than just saying something stupid and trying to explain it away. Phrases like, I was only trying to be funny. And I was mad when I said that. And why are you crying? I didn't mean to say it that way. Those statements shift blame onto the person we hurt instead of us just humbly accepting that we caused harm. If I make someone feel a certain way, I can't turn around and then blame them for feeling a certain way. I have to still apologize. By explaining away, providing intent, these excuses, it implies that the other person is wrong for interpreting the words that they did, that their feelings are wrong. And explaining yourself, that doesn't lead to repair. My intent does not repair the dent. Our scripture for today addresses this issue that we all have in our lives, and it's written by this guy named James. And James was a leader in the early church in Jerusalem. As the faith is spreading throughout the Middle East, he was a key leader to the Jerusalem church. And if you didn't know, James is one of Jesus's immediate family members. He was one of Jesus's brothers. And so how cool is it that our Bible Our Bible has a translation of a letter that was written from someone who was related by blood to Jesus, that he was DNA-ly related to Jesus. Not just the blood of Christ that covers our sins, but he was in the same family. We get to read that. And so James grew up with Jesus, and he came to believe that Jesus is God in human form. Now, I have two sisters, and I guarantee you that they have never once considered me God in human form. They've got so much dirt on me. Here's what James has to say about the weight of our words. This guy who came to believe that Jesus is his Lord, not just his brother. James chapter 3, verse 2. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. We all stumble in many ways. Any exceptions in here? No? See, we have so much in common. We have so much. Why are we so divided as a country? Scott, you might struggle with that underground black market gun ring that you lead, and I struggle with making copies of CDs and giving them to friends. But we all mess up, and here's what we have in common, is we can't not shove our feet into our mouths. We can't help it. James says that if we get to the point where we can always control what we say, we will be 100% fully formed. Perfect. So James keeps going. Let's check it out. He says this: when we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. For those of us who don't have a lot of horseback riding experience or captaining our own ship, consider the steering wheel. Take cars as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong engines, they are steered by a very small steering wheel wherever the driver wants to go. Which gives a whole new slant to road rage, doesn't it? If you let me humble brag about myself, I mean, you don't have a choice, but in teaching Livy how to drive, we were here in the parking lot, and new drivers kind of forget how much movement of that steering wheel really changes the direction of your car. And so, she's starting to get used to being more fluid and turning. And so we came up with a phrase when she's not, it's being herky, like herky-jerky, because she was, doing this. And so I started to say, a steering wheel is a small part of the car, but it changes the direction of this big, huge vehicle and where you're going to go. So small movements lead to big movements. It's like how it says in James, the book in the Bible, our tongue is a small part of our body, but it changes the direction of our conversations and our relationships. Parents, feel free to use that one. My treat. Faith application in motion. So James helps us understand how our tongues become that instrument that guide our conversations and our relationships. Something that new drivers need to know is how slight shifts in the position of the steering wheel, even when you don't intend to make that shift, have big changes. Intent does not necessarily mean the outcome is going to be what you want. I found a great example of good intent getting out of hand quickly, and we're going to watch that clip now. Bedlam. It's just absolute chaos. And you can bet that everyone did not care what Dwight Schrute's intent was by putting them through that kind of fire drill, right? That I'm sure they would always remember that lesson. So what you didn't see is at the end of that scene, is one of the characters, Stanley, he falls over and collapses from what is probably a cardiac event. There's no way that Dwight intended for that to happen to one of his coworkers, right? The gem of this film clip shows exactly what James is trying to communicate to us when he says this: consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. And this is common for all of us. We all have this symptom. Everyone from the super talkative person to the person who uses as few words as possible, we all have that symptom. And it's not just when we physically speak, it's when we get behind our keyboards, whether they're on our phones or on our laptops. Last week, I shared a video from Jimmy Kimmel's talk show where NFL players, these superstars, read mean comments that were written about them online. Have you noticed how much easier it is to keep your mouth shut and refrain from saying something mean when you're face-to-face with someone? Do you think those people last week would have said the same things if they were in the room with Patrick Mahomes? If you're like me, have you noticed that you can never keep your foot out of your mouth? James is a realist about this, just like what we need to be. He says all kinds of animals, birds, and reptiles, sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by humankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. So why are we like this? Why can't we keep from shutting up and from messing up? James's brother has something to say about why. Jesus went on, "What comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come: sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person." So the culprit for all of our problems is this: we let these thoughts fester and grow in our hearts. And if we don't weed them out, they grow, they blossom, they bloom, and they come out of our mouths. What we say is the sign of what we really think and feel about others. And so, echoing his brother about how our insides reflect what we truly think and feel, James says this: "With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water." So here's how the problem can continue, even if we realize that we've started a fire that we didn't intend to start. When we try to explain why we said what we said, the hurtful things, we just add to that fire. It just spreads. We try to contain it, and it just gets out of hand. What we really need to do is to bring out the fire extinguisher. We all need to practice and improve upon how to be humble, how to apologize, how to take the L, as the kids say, and just say, you know what, I made a mistake. Do you know someone in your life, no names, but do you know someone in your life that they just can't seem to say the words, "I'm sorry"? Like they're almost physically unable to do that. How much better would our entire world be? Not just our relationships, but our entire world. How much better it would be if we could just humbly accept that we screwed up and apologized. Apologize for the harm that we've caused. When we started this series, Weight of Your Words, someone emailed me and said that they could relate really well to the things we were talking about. And then she said this: "I want to know how to get past the hurtful words that a loved one said to me. I have no trust." So I had a couple thoughts of practical ways to build up trust with people that I was thinking about. My initial thought is that you got to collect your thoughts. So we can't add to that fire. So you got to pump the chicken brake and collect your thoughts. And maybe that means that you have to circle back at a different time with that person. But you pump that chicken brake so you don't add to the fire, and you explain that you need to talk with them about something that's been bothering you. You got to be willing to have a courageous conversation. And Jesus teaches us that we need to go and salvage relationship with people. In fact, he says, when someone harms you, go and talk with them. It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean that I'm ever excited to have those kinds of conversations. They make my stomach drop, feel like it's a bottomless pit of just anxiety. But we're called. We're called to repair relationships. It also sparked another thought that had to do with the first verse that we read from our passage today, James chapter 3, verse 2. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. Now, this person who emailed me that they are struggling with hurtful words that people said to them, this is an amazing person. But I know that this person probably says hurtful things too. Because we all have to remember that none of us are perfect. We need to practice pumping that chicken brake. When you begin to try to explain and defend what you said, why you said what you said, that's just going to add to that fire. So pump that chicken brake. Be humble and apologize. Ask for forgiveness. That repairs the dent, but our intent does not. So may you learn how to be a little bit more humble. May you learn how to apologize. And may you get better at repairing those relationships.